different models. We have interest really
Hey,
is
Bridget.
at the bottom. We're going to zoom down. Asher-thoracic,
And
Asher-lumbo. Okay,
Oh,
here we are down
it's
at the
recording?
lower end of your spine, and there's something at number 14 that's important to know. You want to know what 14 is?
The conus medullaris.
Conus medullaris, at the bottom of the spinal cord. The cord itself ends about L1-ish. So it's on one of the board boys. This one has it as well. So that's the conus medullaris, which is the bottom of the spinal cord. They have all this other horsehair coming down. What's all this other stuff? Cauda equina, literally horse's head or horse's hair or horse's tail, cauda equina. So the spinal cord ends at 14, and the horse's tail is all this other wiring that comes down. The very bottom wire, if you follow my finger down, all the way down to the end of your coccyx, which is about right here, it'd be one little wire, one little nerve that ends at the bottom there. What do you call the very bottom nerve? Filum terminale, literally thread end. So conus medullaris ends the cord, filum terminale ends the cauda equina. So they're not the same thing. So the cord ends here, but the nerves end there. Make sense? So on a typical test question, where does the spinal cord end? We want that one, not this one. Make sense?
And that one down there is the
Filum terminale. The conus medullaris is the end of the cord. Up around L, whatever.
But the other one's the bottom of the nerves.
Yeah, bottom of the nerve. The cauda equina ends, the horse's tail drags below the tail. Okay? So then denticulate ligaments, I'm going to show you on a different model, but that's what glues your spinal cord into the vertebrae. So I'm going to change models on you. Go back to this one. I'm going to go to this one. My favorite model, hint, hint. Alright, so we're going to go to page 56 and identify a lot of stuff on here. So, first thing we're going to notice is the spinal cord's in here. This is your vertebrae. If you look carefully, it's impossible to see easily, but right here and here, those are ligaments gluing my spinal cord into my bone. What do you call those ligaments that look like teeth? Denticulate ligaments. Those are the denticulates are gluing your spinal cord literally within the cavity there. But then we're going to name all these other things. So here's one of the problems. You can use dorsal or ventral, which is what I learned, or you can use anterior and posterior. They're synonyms. But some books and people and teachers use some versus others. So you'll notice on your list, sometimes posterior and anterior in parentheses, sometimes dorsal ventral are. They're the same word. So don't freak out if I say dorsal. You can say posterior. Just tradition kind of more than anything. But the hardest part is remembering the differences. So the butterfly, those are the, quote, the horns. The wiring that comes out of the spinal cord, those are the roots like a tree. So if you keep the horn versus the root, you can understand it. So, the butterfly, moose's rat, you called it. What color is it? Gray matter, meaning it's not myelinated. The white stuff would be white matter, which means it is myelinated. So you have a gray and white. So if you go down the gray matter part, those are going to be the horns of the butterfly. So if I'm going to point to right here, which horn is that one?
Dorsal.
You can say dorsal or posterior. You'll pick one. So one of the things you have to do with the spinal cord is know which end is front and back. So if you get it wrong, you're doomed, right? So you're going to figure out, okay, a couple things. If you have the bone, hopefully you remember that's in the back side. That'll be helpful. The other thing to notice is the front has a big line up it, big gash, big fissure. The back doesn't. The butterfly looks a little oblong. But try to remember which end's front and back before you do stuff. So this is your posterior or dorsal horn. This part would be my what?
Anterior or ventral.
Very good. And this part on the side would be my
Lateral horn.
lateral horn if it has one. Not all do. So you're going to have the horns of the butterfly, the gray. Then you have this gray thing between the two halves of the butterfly.
Gray commissure.
Gray commissure. Yes, the commissure. Connection. Commission. That's your gray commissure. Right.
Can you show me that?
Yeah, from that right there.
So it's the thing that frames kind of the central canal?
Indeed, and the center of the commissure is the central canal. So the central canal is in the middle of the great commissure that connects the two butterfly halves together. Right? So So now I'm going to point to something different. I'm going to point to this yellow wire that's coming out of the horn and going here. What is that? That's a root. That's a dorsal root or posterior root, because like a tree, it's the root. This one here, number 17, must be the
Ventral root.
ventral, or you can say anterior root. So horns make roots. So 18's dorsal, 17's ventral root. If you follow number 18, you'll notice it makes a big bump at 19. What do you call a big group?
Ganglia.
It's actually ganglion here. So that's the dorsal root ganglion. That's another way you can tell the back side is the dorsal root ganglion is on the dorsal side. So if I look over here, I follow it back, it's over here. So you have a dorsal horn, the dorsal root ganglion. Ventral horn, the ventral root, there's no ganglion. Makes sense? So another clue for back versus front. Make sense?
Can you do the roots again, please?
Sure. So dorsal root, the dorsal root ganglion, ventral root does not have the ganglion, it should be under that. Okay, now we're going to do the white stuff. So the white stuff is myelin, they have different names. So let's find the anterior median fissure. Can anyone find where that is?
Yeah.
Tell me when you think you know. Here?
No.
That's
no.
closer.
Other side.
Ah!
Right down.
Right there. So literally front up the middle crack. Anterior median fissure. Big line up the front. The front has the fissure is how we remember it. Because the back has a depression. And how do you say depressed? You sulk. So that's the posterior median sulcus. So the back has a depression, the front has a crack. The fissure's in the front, the sulcus in the back. But the back also has a septum. What is a septum?
A separator.
Separator or a wall. So number 48 here in the picture, that is the posterior median septum, or medial septum. So the front has a fissure, the back has a wall. Far so good? Those are in your middle. Now we have these F words. More F words. Okay. Posterior, lateral, anterior funiculus. You can also call these columns. It is a legitimate synonym. But my manual is funiculus. So funiculus is the white stuff. So I'm going to find some white stuff here. Which white stuff is that?
Dorsal funiculus.
Dorsal, or better word would be posterior is what we use. The white stuff here, lateral funiculus. The white stuff here.
Anterior.
Very good.
So it's all part of the white matter.
The white matter, which are called columns. So again, front and back is important. So I have my my ventral horn with my anterior funiculus, lateral horn, lateral funiculus, posterior horn, or dorsal, posterior funiculus. The funiculus are the white, the horns are the gray. Make
Mr.
sense?
Christie?
And in the horns would be, or I'm sorry, in the tracks, let's try that again. In the funiculus would be the tracks, which we haven't gone over yet in lecture. You do okay on the white versus gray in that thing. So what we're going to do is change models now and do it again, but a different model to look at. Because there are two I could ask you with. I'm an evil bastard, and you don't know which one I'm going to pick.
Did you get that in the lecture video?
It's probably on the internet somewhere now, right? I'm an evil bastard. So this is the small model, it's slightly different color. But it's a small model, so here you don't have the bone to help you. That's what makes it evil, so you have to figure out front and back. So let's try that. Back.
Posterior.
You sure?
Yeah.
What is this, posterior, anterior, what is it?
Yeah.
The ganglion.
Yeah, posterior.
How did you know?
By the wings.
We have a ganglion here, the butterfly looks that way, you got the deep front fissure in the front, right? So use all those clues and get your front and back straight before you dive in. One year, I didn't do this on purpose, but I had the model turned for some weird reason. Everyone just collapsed and died. Okay? So, but find the back. So horn, root, ganglion, fissure front, sulcus back, and orient yourself accordingly.
So there isn't a ventral ganglion.
There is no ventral root ganglion, no. It's a dorsal root ganglion only.
Okay.
Ventral side just comes in straight. The ganglion's off something else. That's a sympathetic thing. Let's go back to the model I was on. I'm going to go next again. And we're going to look at it again, because now we're going to go back and add some more detail. On the very well, at the top of 56, there was some meninges you're supposed to know. What are meninges? You haven't covered them yet in lecture, that's next time. But what are meninges?
Spinal fluid.
So the spinal fluid is, it's a wrapping, like an endoneurium kind of thing. So what you're going to have to do in your head is come down from the bone, and notice here, there's three white things wrapped around the spinal cord. Those are the meninges. And if you memorize them in order, life is great. So number 8 is pointing to the outermost white layer around the spinal cord. Which one is that? Dura mater, literally tough mother in Latin. The next one down, which is this one right here, is the arachnoid, or spider-like. And then there's a space, and then the white one on the outside, which is number 24, is the who? Pia mater, delicate mom. So there's dura, arachnoid, and pia as you go superficial to deep. So a couple tricks. There are spaces in there. So look above number 8. You'll notice there's a space between number 8 and the bone. That's above my dura. So that space is your epidural space, literally above the dura. If you look carefully, there's a little teeny space between the dura and the arachnoid. It's a virtual space that's there. What do you call that one? The subdural, below my dural space. That's this line. And there's a big space below the arachnoid. So that's going to be your subarachnoid space. So you have your 3 layers, and there's 3 spaces above the dura, between the dura and arachnoid, and under the arachnoid. Those are your meninges. Yes.
Those are they continuous with the meninges in the skull?
Yes. It's all one sheet of wrapper. All the way around.
So, where's the cerebral spinal fluid? Isn't that in there?
Subarachnoid space. Yep. This is the CSF lives in the subarachnoid space.
For the spinal fluid?
Okay.
Yep. Okay, on the meninges. All right, so those are your meninges and spaces within the bone. So now what we're going to do is journey over to page, what is that, 57 in my packet. And now you get the joy that you learned today in class. Because now what you're going to do is this thing. So what I would recommend you do is take pictures of the board boys, we call them, and then try to find these nerves on them, and then work backwards to try to figure out. If you go from the root down, you're just going to get lost somewhere in the merging here. But find where it goes on the body, the right-hand column from lecture, and work your way backwards. So if I know it goes to my, like this one goes under my armpit, which nerve might go under my armpit?
Axillary.
Axillary. So I got to think back. Okay, axillary was what plexus? That was my brachial plexus. So I'm going to go basically from right to left on the drawings you did this morning. So if I know that's my axillary, that's going to be my brachial plexus. That's C5, C6, pinch my pits. You know, you can do that kind of logic. If you try to go from this direction, you're going to get, it's actually hard, even for me, to go down from the bones and try to figure out where they're plumbing. So go the other way. Try it from the body part and work your way back up the wire. Right. Did you notice you even don't see some of the wires up in there? So when you're on 57 in your packet, try to go from the body part the nerve goes to and work backwards up the body. Yes?
Will we ever have to know specifically which nerve it is as far as like C4?
No. You should know which the plexus members, like,
And what that includes?
right. So for example, C345 keeps your diaphragm alive. You have to know the phrenic is C345, but you don't have to like find, oh, that one's going to C6 or whatever. So you have to know the ones I gave you in lecture, the grouping. So like for example, on this picture, I could point and say, okay, what plexus is here? And you could say the plexus is your lumbar plexus. I could say, no, I want the nerve here, which is your, well, okay, let's do this one. It's easier to see here. That one crosses over. That's on my thigh, femoral. So I can say, okay, well, what are the roots of the femoral nerve?
L1 through L1.
That's the plexus, L2 to L4. Right,
So, wait, is
so-
it L2 or because the plexus in the lab manual says L1 through L4?
right, but the femoral nerve itself
Okay.
is L2 to L4. So what you want to do is look at this and say, that's a femoral nerve, that's a sciatic nerve, that's a median nerve. So be able to find the nerves and then work backwards to all the other data you can memorize on the charts, plexus and whatnot. Your hardest job for this week's lab is finding the board boys because they're different from each other. And then figuring out what the nerves are on each one. Because they're slightly off. Right? Make sense?
Are there certain things that are missing that we can't find?
That one does not have a conus medullaris.
Which one?
Or I think the one up there. Is that the one I'm thinking of? He does not have a conus medullaris or a filum terminale, well as that one does. And then this one has a really crummy phrenic, and its femoral is odd. That one actually, this one's the better of the two. But I can put a sticker on anything I want. Because I'm evil.
Which one's that?
The other one. That's this one.
So here,
Make sense?
which movie?
By the way, I can also do the same nerves on Mini-Man. So for example, Mini-Man. Let's do Mini-Man for a little brief time. Come here, dear. Let go. You don't need this. So for example, I could point to these yellow things and ask you, well, what nerve is, let's do one. Here's one running down the middle of my forearm. Which one do you think that might be?
Radialis.
Medial.
Median or medial nerves. And then I could go backwards, well, what plexus is that? What roots are that? Here's one to my pinky, here's one to my thumb. So also take a look at these and try to correlate these with the board boys, right? But this is the hardest job you're going to do this week, is just figuring out what wires what on those models, because they don't look quite like you expect them to be.
So you
Make sense?
could like open it up and
Yes.
just have a nerve.
He has nerves in arms and legs, so do those models. And
So
stuff.
in arms and legs.
Yes. Now all you have left are reflexes. Let's briefly go through some reflex terminology. Which you don't need this. You're supposed to know a few things about the reflexes. Let's review what you're supposed to know. We haven't learned yet in lecture, but you're going to learn this next time.
It was just two. Yeah.
Okay, sensor and effector. Can someone remind me from the first day of class, so you won't fail your final, what the difference between a sensor and effector is? Sensor does what? Receives or senses or detects, and effector does what?
Send out.
Tells
Responds, right? So, in your patellar reflex, you hit the what?
patella.
Patella ligament, that would be your sensor, or the nerve in it. And then the effector would be your quadriceps, because they respond. So for these reflexes, you have to think about what did I hit or do, and what responded. Then you have two sets of questions. Okay, can someone tell me what autonomic versus somatic, what does autonomic mean?
The body does it itself.
Automatic is also an internal visceral organ. Versus somatic means,
Responding to an outside stimulus.
or a voluntary organ. So the question for you is, when my leg kicks, is that an autonomic, meaning internal smooth muscle organ, or is that an external voluntary muscle organ?
Somatic.
It's somatic. Quadriceps are voluntary skeletal muscle. You have control on your quads. Something like your eyeball, though, you don't have control of your eyeball. You cannot control it, so it's an autonomic reflex.
Okay, so the autonomic is internal smooth muscle organ.
Yes.
And the somatic is.
Voluntary skeletal muscle.
But if you're hitting your patellar reflex,
Yes.
you are not controlling the reflex.
Right, but
You're
the
not
muscle is voluntary that you're using. You're just using it involuntarily.
Okay.
Right? So that's not the whether you have control or not, it's whether the muscle you could control.
Okay.
And then ipsilateral contralateral. Ipsi means same side, so you affect the same thing you sense. And contralateral means opposite side. So if you hit your right leg, which leg should kick?
Right.
Your right leg. So that would be which one?
Ipsilateral.
Ipsilateral. If I hit your right leg and your left leg does something,
Something's wrong.
yeah, if something's wrong, that's contralateral. These are words you use in reflexes. So your patellar reflex is a ipsilateral somatic reflex. I affect the same side of the body with a voluntary muscle responding to what I do. Yes?
We don't need to know like the monosynaptic, polysynaptic.
No, that'll be for lecture next time.
Okay.
For lab, just know what you hit, what muscle it was, which of these it is, and what happens. When you hit your knee, it should kick, right? Do the left.
Ipsilateral somatic.
We'll do more of that next lecture. We'll have some more of these languages. But for now, all you gotta do is basically memorize those 4 tests and which of those things they were. Make sense? All right. Then next week we don't have lab, but then the week after that, you get to come back and do 75 questions of health. So use your time as wisely in the next 2 weeks as you can.
Sorry, family.
Yes. Gives you a good excuse to get out of mashed potatoes. So use your time, or not.
I'll still eat, I just
Yeah,
want to-
yeah, I'm gonna take the
Apple
apple
pie.
pie, I'm gonna take the whole